dead formats that we miss.
Oh, I miss Standard.
In my Worst of 2023 video, I called attention to the point that Wizards of the Coast had made a major announcement of their intention to work to revitalize the Standard format, and then, as far as 2023 was concerned anyway, did very little in this regard. Now, this was not meant to disparage the actions that they did take. In fact, I think what little they have done has certainly been steps in the right direction, and we can even see hints at Paper Standard returning bit by bit as a result. Rather, my issue was with the fact that there is so much more, much more that could be done, and it felt like such a minimal effort had actually been implemented. And revitalizing Paper Standard is something that I believe in, not as a Standard player so much, but as a Magic the Gathering player. A healthy Standard helps all Magic the Gathering formats, even formats like Commander. Our game is not unlike an ecosystem after all, and just as within an ecosystem, the little bugs of a swamp are necessary for there to be more complex life forms such as crocodiles or osprey or pioneer players, so too do we need the bugs of our Magic the Gathering swamp, Standard and Limited. It's an ecosystem, and in regards to our most played format, Commander, I've always felt that Commander is at its best when it is played around the other formats, not so much as being the only central format. So yes, I do really want to see Standard revitalized, and presented here are some of the many steps that I feel Wizards of the Coast could and should and hopefully will be taking to revitalize the format. And my suggestions here are focused less on creating a competitive and satisfying pro player environment, which is something that I actually feel Wizards of the Coast does have a lot of insight into how to do, but rather what I'll be talking about is focused on getting the casual players, the local game store players, back into the Standard grind, as it were, and that segment I feel Wizards sometimes, well, could use a little bit of help. So let's discuss the key steps to revitalizing Standard, shall we? But first, do you feel like there's just never enough time for anything anymore? I know I do. I've tried using magic to stop time, but Teferi says I should stop doing that. Doesn't even work. So what's a professor to do? How about not worrying about cooking meals? And that is possible not thanks to magic, but thanks to today's video's sponsor, Factor. Factor delivers delicious chef-prepared meals that are ready to eat in about 2 minutes. Whether you're grabbing a hot meal for your lunch or a smoothie for a pre-workout, nothing tops Factor when it comes to saving you time and hassle. There's no ingredients to buy, no prep work to do, and no messy cleanup. Best of all, you don't have to sacrifice nutrition for convenience. That's because Factor offers over 30 meal options every week, including vegan and keto-friendly options. So saving time doesn't mean compromising on your nutrition goals. Meal plans range from 4 to 18 meals per week, and you can easily modify your plan or even skip a week if needed. In fact, the only difficult thing about Factor is figuring out what you're going to do with all the time you save. Maybe I'll take up pickleball or horse archery. Just use my link to get 50% off your first Factor box and free wellness shots for life. Choose 2 free wellness shots from 3 available flavors for every order while you're an active subscriber. Click the link below or scan the QR code to start saving time with Factor today, and thank you, Factor, for sponsoring this video. First and foremost, if Wizards of the Coast really wants to revitalize Standard, then it is going to have to reinvest in the local game store and work to make Friday Night Magic a destination event for Magic the Gathering players. The hard shift to Commander didn't just mean more Magic the Gathering players were playing Commander instead of formats like Standard, it also meant more and more players were playing out of the local game store. You and your friends can have Commander Night anywhere, but Standard events are largely limited to local game stores and Friday Night Magic, and of course, online via Magic Arena. And I think that's often overlooked. People see the rise in Commander players and think, well, that's why Standard is struggling, but I think it's that the rise in Commander players meant an exodus from places like the local game store. Therefore, by making a concentrated effort to revitalize the local game store, and I feel specifically making Friday Night Magic that destination event again for Magic the Gathering players, you get people back into the store and hopefully back into standard events. How do we do this? Well, the most obvious thing to do is just to reinvest the conversation into Friday Night Magic being said destination event. I see endless promotion and conversation of everything from secret layers to Commander precons, but hardly ever see much talk or hype about Friday Night Magic promos, for example, or even in-store events like the Store Championship, which I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a moment. And yes, while Friday Night Magic can be anything from draft to standard to even pioneer or modern, when the Friday Night Magic machine is in full swing, the combination of draft and standard is a very likely go-to. But nonetheless, whether they are doing a pioneer Friday Night Magic or a standard one, when these in-store events are the destination, you've got more people in the store and more likelihood of standard events firing, of them having a population. Another major reinvestment both into the local game store and into standard is to bring back game day, or since we do still have game day in the form of the Store Championship, make the Store Championship happen when game day used to happen, or in other words, happen a lot sooner. Game day and the Store Championship are very similar events, and game day used to be one of my favorite events ever. The big difference in the prizing structure is that game day used to award a playmat to its winner. Hey look, I won Game Day Dark Ascension with Mono Red Burn. My greatest competitive victory. But Store Championships, instead of a playmat, will award the winner with a textless promo card, which I'm gonna admit is pretty cool, and some of them in the past have been great. Just like with Game Day, everybody playing at a Store Championship gets a full art promo card. That's another thing I really like about these events. You show up, you're going to walk away with something, and quite frankly, something special. If you make top 8, you get an additional full art promo card, and of course now, instead of the playmat, winners of the Store Championship get these, quite frankly, really cool textless promos. Every set that comes out has a Store Championship, but whereas Game Day would happen right after the launch of a new set, Store Championships come later, a lot later. So even though the prizing structure is similar or essentially the same between Store Championship and Game Day, that difference in start time and the fact that your store could choose any format that it wanted for the Store Championship is what I feel diminished interest in the Store Championship. And I think Wizards of the Coast agreed with me on at least half of that because, as of Murders at Karlov Manor, hey, I got the name right. There's one for ya. Game Day, or the Store Championship, whatever you want to call it, is now required to be standard. And this right there is an A+. Whoever made that change, we are on the same wavelength. I'm acknowledging it here. A+ decision making. But what still needs to change is that start time. It's happening too late. For Murders at Karlov Manor, you're going to have to wait until March to go down to your Store Championship. And in all honesty, it should be happening when Game Day used to happen, which is at the start of the new set. It used to go pre-release, launch, Game Day, and that system was great. You showed up at pre-release, you probably skipped the launch event, I know, maybe you had your new standard deck by then, but Game Day was the big motivator to get that standard deck together so that you could participate. And now that the Store Championships are required to be standard, we need to have them happen sooner so that people are motivated to put those standard decks together as soon as possible. Turn up to the store and have a deck to play. And even though it is taking place all the way in March, check out those promos. I hope you look at your local game store's Store Championship and put a standard deck together so that you can participate and maybe take one of these beauties home. Hey, maybe just advertising the Store Championship more would help. Did you know before watching this video what the promos were for the next Store Championship? That it had to be in standard? That it was taking place and when? If no, then Wizards of the Coast needs to do a better job just bringing the conversation about the Store Championship to the player base. But having events like Friday Night Magic and the Store Championship to foster standard play are no use if we don't have any standard decks to play, which is why Wizards of the Coast needs to bring back standard challenger decks and put digital redemption codes in them. This is kind of a twofer. It's building a bridge between digital and paper. I know that Wizards of the Coast is never going to actually put digital redemption codes in booster packs, but the idea of a digital redemption code in a standard challenger deck does a lot to revitalize the format and actually bring people both from the game store to Arena and from Arena, where standard is being heavily played, to the local game store. The standard challenger deck was actually a great product. Once per year, 4 of these would be released, and the attempt was for them to be a fully playable, right out of the box standard deck. Maybe not a fully refined competitive standard deck, but certainly something that you could bring down to Friday Night Magic and have a reasonable chance with, and certainly have an upgrade path within. While of course there was a hit and miss nature to them, overall I found them to typically be high quality and in many cases high value, and best of all, they allowed anyone, new or old, to walk into a game store, drop about $20-25 and have a deck that they could play at Friday Night Magic and maybe work towards upgrading into something even stronger. But they stopped making them, and well, they really need to come back if standard is to be fully revitalized, especially for a new and returning player. Imagine that's you and you're going into a local game store and you want to play at Friday Night Magic, and that event is standard. How do I get started? Well, go log online, try and find a list. I don't know if your local game store is going to have a single stock to fill that list. How do I get those cards? How do I get and play? Wouldn't it be so much easier to just be handed a deck like a challenger deck and be able to start from there? Whereas challenger decks would come out once per year, their predecessor, event decks, came out once per set. Event decks were generally a lot worse than challenger decks. They seldom resembled actual decks being played, and had a lot fewer rares and never any mythics. While occasionally there would be a good one, usually event decks at even the most casual of Friday Night Magics wouldn't stand a chance without serious upgrades, which is why I always felt strongly that challenger decks were vastly superior, and I hope very much we see them return soon. Now, maybe challenger decks don't make a huge profit for Wizards of the Coast the way Commander precons do. I have no idea on that, by the way, but even if they aren't a big money maker, sometimes there's a necessary loss needed to keep a highly beneficial system going. Though I do think sales would be better on them if they had those digital redemption codes for Arena, because that giant Arena audience would go in to the local game store to buy the challenger decks just to be able to redeem them on Arena, where that's a pretty good deal. You're selling more decks that way, and you're also creating that beautiful bridge between digital and paper. Heck, the new players who are picking up their first standard deck can practice on Arena at home. You've got people participating in both systems, digital and paper. So players do need that place to play standard again, thus the local game store and Friday Night Magic needs to be a destination. We need a bridge between digital and paper to help get people into that destination, and we need a product like challenger decks so that there's a way to easily start playing standard once you get there. But I think the number one thing needed to help revitalize standard is a relic from a bygone era, back from a time when nearly every week there was a GP event being held in a town near you, and players would go from their local game store down to that event to play, to compete, hustle for day 2, and maybe, just maybe, end up in a feature match where for a brief moment the watching world would know their name. I cannot stress enough how vital regular coverage of GP-like events was and still is to standard revitalization. I know it's expensive beyond belief, difficult as hell, but I feel strongly that it is worth it, incredibly worth it. Because one of the best ways to get people playing standard again is to motivate them through an aspirational system. We used to call it the path to the Pro Tour, something that became obscured and unknown for many years. And so why play this rotating format, even if it rotates less frequently, if there's no reason to play it, if there's nothing that you're going for? These days, event coverage largely exists only for Pro Tours and the Magic World Championship. Championship, as well as Arena Championships. All official coverage is streamed on Magic the Gathering's official Twitch channel, and there's also some decent article write-ups at magic.gg that recap events. Recently, RC Denver did have live coverage put on by DreamHack Magic, but as far as I can tell, this is the only time this has happened. And there are of course things like the NRG series, which streams coverage regularly, but for the most part, coverage only exists for the top echelons of play. But it can't just be high-level events that get coverage, and it can't just be an occasional RCQ that gets coverage. This needs to be a regular, recurring thing, not just to create that aspirational system, which of course is vital, but also to flesh out this idea of the competitive world that Standard is a large part of. The commentators, the pros, tuning in every week to watch. And yes, not every event is going to be Standard, but I would argue just as having a healthy Standard is good for the rest of the game, so too is having a healthy rest of the game good for Standard. Heck, many of the things I talked about here would also work to strengthen Draft as well, which I believe also helps Standard, and yes, even helps Commander. Hell, Pauper, Pioneer, Modern, it all thrives when we just have people regularly going into their communities and playing with one another. Being limited to the kitchen table is limiting. We need those spaces active and thriving. But that, of course, is just my opinion, and now I really want to hear from you. How would you revitalize Standard? Do you agree with the points I made in this video, or have ideas of your own? Let me know in the comments below. And do keep an eye open in March for the Store Championship. It may not be happening soon enough, but when it happens, you won't want to miss it, and it's happening only at your local games store. And remember, stop wasting your money on overpriced delivery food that comes an hour late and lukewarm at best, usually cold and congealed. And what are you even doing? Just go with Factor. Factor are delicious meals ready to eat in just a couple minutes, and you're gonna save so much money and time with Factor, and even more with my special link. That's right, because when you use my link, you get 50% off your first Factor box and free wellness shots for life. Choose 2 free wellness shots from 3 available flavors for every order while you're an active subscriber. Just click the link below or scan the QR code to start saving time with Factor today. Thank you, Factor, for sponsoring this video.
Next time on Shuffle Up and Play.
Unknown Commander. Gavin, I don't know what this is. This is your event?
So I design about 60 or so playtest cards for each one of these. People have never seen before.
What makes a card a playtest card?
They look like this.
Hi everybody, I'm Rachel Weeks. I'm playing the Colossal Dreadmaw.
Hi, my name is George. I am going to be playing Polis, the Planeshifter.
I want to have the honor of playing the first playtest card of the game.
Wow,
And it's
so fast.
Command Power Plants.
What is that?
Ross gonna love this one.
Oh no. So George,
Okay.
look at my thing and I want to
Why?
attack you. I'm not scared of the Roman.
Oh, you
Why
should.
not?
No,
You should be.
I choose a plane at random.
All right.
There is Immerstorm.
You have 7 floating green mana from
Yeah,
that?
and you know what I'm gonna do with it, bro?
I'm gonna cast a Colossal
Cast a
Dreadmore.
Foundation Breaker.
Wow.
I mean, a Colossal Dreadmaw.
I'll say that there's not a lot of balance and rigor put into these unknown playtest cards.
Okay, there's no tutors.